You gave us your book last time, Don't Take Your Life Personally. I've read that book, very great book, sir. And some questions there. Some places now you say that you must notice the space between the two persons. There is a space you must notice. So I'm not very clear what is the purpose and noticing the space between the two forms.
Well, it sounds like space doesn't have any quality other than space, and so it's if you notice, if you look at space, there's nothing there except it's a visual. You're observing it through the eye consciousness, but it doesn't have any qualities of like or dislike or good or bad. It is just what it is. So it's a way of where when we look at people or things, and it triggers off personal criticisms, liking, disliking, approving, disapproving. So moving towards more equanimity or tranquility, like space is peaceful because it doesn't demand anything, and it also is infinite. It has no boundary. But it's here and now. It's with us all the time, and yet we may never consciously observe it. We because the worldly life is just reactions to praise and blame, success, failure, happiness and suffering, and so forth. So that we don't register. We don't really pay attention to the present moment as it is, because space is always here and now. It's infinite, it's impersonal, it has no, it's not about being good or bad, right or wrong. And so I found, in the book, the relationship, as I started living my life, getting to know the different monks, then I started projecting personalities onto them. This is a good monk, this isn't a very good monk, and I like this one, I don't like that one. And so I found, when we were sitting together in meditation in the sala, I just started, instead of seeing them as personalities, as people with, that I like or don't like or approve of or disapprove of, I just started noticing the space between them. And that gave the sense of the impersonal, I was no longer creating or projecting onto the forms in the space anything. They were still there, and I didn't ask them to go away, but my attention was on the spaces between the monks, and to see what that has effect, how that affects conscious experience. Because as consciousness is what we are really, and the consciousness is impersonal. It's not mine or yours or male or female or anything. And consciousness has this infinite. It's invisible. It's infinite. It's what we are really. But we identify with the sankharas, with the conditions, with the physical body, with what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, our emotions. We are conditioned, like cultural conditioning, social conditioning, religious conditioning is all about, you should be like this and you shouldn't be like that, and there's reward and punishment. punishment. You know, in your family you're rewarded for being good and obeying your parents and punished for not disobeying them and so forth. So every society does this. You know, it's about conditioning you to accept the kind of class you're in, the ethnic background you come from, the religion, the political party. These are all conditioned into us. We're not born with any of that. But when a baby is born, it has physical form, human form, and it's conscious. And so then these are natural conditions. These aren't imposed or conditioned into the baby. It's just the natural process of birth and the natural state of conscious awareness, and it has survival intelligence, you know, so it knows its needs in the moment, when to be fed and when it needs attention, when it needs to sleep. But it doesn't have a personality. It doesn't see itself as a male or female or Indian or Western or anything like that. These identities come through the cultural conditioning. So the first three fetters, the Sangyojanas, the 10 fetters, the first three are the ones that prevent stream entry, seeing the path. So, you know, the Sotapanna is where you see the path for the first time. You have an insight into the path. And to do that, then the first three fetters are, you know, they're artificial fetters. They're not natural conditions that are born with a species, you know, and the mammalian condition and the physical body and consciousness. They're acquired after birth through the parents, through the social background, the society you come from. So, like Sakya Ditti, which is translated as the ego, or the self-identity with the body, that, like a newborn baby, doesn't have that. Doesn't think of itself as Indian, or a boy or a girl. It's aware, you know, in its nature is to be aware, and it's conscious. So, and its limitation, physical limitation, it's you know, human babies are very dependent on the mother for the first several years of their life to be able to survive, and so there's a instinctual intelligence that come with it. But the kind of knowledge, like education, cultural conditioning, the language we learn, they all come after you're born. And so those first three fetters are all about being able to recognize that, to see, to not. That's why "Don't Take Your Life Personally" is why the title of the book, because we take everything personally, when actually it is what it is, you know. So, you know, some of the conditioning is very good, very wholesome, very moral. Some of the conditioning isn't very good, and some of it's horrible. It depends on, you know, the experience of the child as it's growing up with the family and society it's born into. So it's not that we're against conditioning, but the Buddha is saying, look at the conditioning, and that which is aware of conditioning is the unconditioned, that's consciousness. That you can be aware of, I'm Indian, I'm American, or things like that. These are thoughts that come and go in the mind, and so we're observing them for what they are, sankharas, arising, ceasing, anicca, dukkha, anatta, rather than holding on to operating always from the idea that we are these conditions, or these conditions are me.
Could you give us some advice on how do we really see through this private practice? What do we do in our meditative practice to be able to see through that?
Well, that's to investigate, like there's so much, like Dhamma Vijaya, the second factor of enlightenment, sati, Dhamma Vijaya, like to investigate. And that, like, this is where sati sampajanya, or mindfulness, is the only way we can do this. So mindfulness, consciousness, they're the same thing, really. Like right now, whatever you're feeling or thinking, you're aware of it. Whatever it might be, good, bad, right, or wrong. There's an awareness of it, and so we begin to develop a trust in this awareness, rather than in the condition that we're feeling, say, in mental proliferation, thinking, emotional habits that we have. We begin to observe them from the position of the Bhutto, or the Buddha position, rather than from the personal identity, which is a form of grasping, clinging to them.
Only when we talk of trust in something, so trusting in awareness seems very abstract, so kindly, isn't it? So if you could kindly help us develop that trust in awareness.
Well, it's the only possible thing to trust. It's very simple. It's just like you're now listening, opening up, like being more open and attentive. And because, like, you can observe in the present moment, always wherever you are, the breath, your body's breathing, it is a posture of sitting, standing, walking, lying down. There's the presence of a physical form, the body, and its sensations of pleasurable, painful, and neutral. Then there's also, you're aware of the mental states going on, like you're feeling happy or sad or doubtful, uncertain. Is like this. And so it's observing this, trusting this awareness. It's whatever the breathing is like this, inhaling is like this. So you're not trying to follow like some kind of technique to get tranquility, but you're more observing just the natural inhaling and reality of the present, and the exhaling is like this. So you're not trying to designate it as breathing good or breathing not very good, but it is what it is. The same with your emotional state is like this. Sometimes the weather is gloomy and wet and rainy and cold, and we the emotional state we have is like this, which can be, depressed or sad. And this awareness isn't trying to change it, we should be happy and full of bliss all the time, but it's more acknowledging the way it is as you live your life. Like consciousness and mindfulness, they're really the same thing. And consciousness then isn't judgmental. It's not when you judge your feelings or judge yourself as a person, that's sankhara. It's the conditioned phenomena through values of right and wrong, good and bad. But pure consciousness is aware. It is awareness itself, but it's not judgmental. It discerns reality from delusion, self from non-self, grasping from not grasping. So like in the Noble Truths, Four Noble Truths, the second, inside of the second Noble Truth is to let go of desire. And so, I did a lot of meditation on desire, getting to know tanha, desire, like kama, sensual desire for sensual pleasure. It's like this. Not trying to get rid of it, but to recognize it. Then I'd question that which is aware of desire isn't desire. Desire can't be aware of itself, because it rises and ceases. You don't always have desires. So then you're investigating. That which knows desire isn't desire. So then as you keep pursuing that, investigating like that, then you begin to let go of the assumption that desires are yours and you should have only good ones and not bad ones and things like this. The way the judgmental mind will always divide and separate, good from bad and right from wrong, because the conditioned realm is always about quality and quantity and characteristic. It's about things that change. Where when you're trusting in awareness, more and more you're trusting in ultimate reality, in Dhamma, in the ultimate Dhamma, the Amata Dhamma, immortal Dhamma, that is what you really are. So you're learning to recognize that. It's here and now, it's not something you lack, not something you've got to get. It's already here and now, but we can't recognize it when we're caught in the delusions that we create, that we're conditioned with. So that's why we trust the awareness, and the more you investigate that which is aware right now, then is what you trust, and then the doubt, what should I do about it? And that's another creation of the mind, say.
This when you were coming, Bhante, it was a very important question which our friend asked, because we have been trained in a technique, we have been working on that, and he's also been like me meditating for 30 years. It's the whole task of entering stream seems to be hopeless. You go and ask, I don't have to ask. So I said, it's not hopeless, Bhante will help us to.
No, it's all.
It's not a hopeless task. So maybe you can ask him.
But when we were walking down to meet you, and Professor Dhar told me that if you have a question, I said that my chances of entering the stream, even if there's a bulldozer to push me, is not going to happen because I have given up. Every time I sat at a retreat, I sat with a desire that this time I'm going to get this, and this time I'm going to get that. And I come out very dejected, so I have kind of given up. And then Professor Dhar told me that please state this condition to Lumpo, and probably you will get some very, very noble answer or wise answer to help you with my meditation. But I am passing to a state where I am a little depressed, I am a little down, but I have entire faith in the Lord, I have entire faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and what you're saying, the conditioned mind, that yesterday with Ajhan Sumedho we were talking about vegetarianism, and who are we to judge whether a vegetarian is right or non-vegetarian is wrong? So this conditioned mind, what you are saying is so very true. I realize that, but just the fact of my meditation and getting the stream, I have kind of given up on that. So that's my personal state of affairs right now.
Right, because that, like when you're goal or like meditation with the idea of getting something,
Right.
that's the problem.
I know. I know.
And you,
But the mind, but sir, how can you state that is also a state of the mind? I know it's the desire. The second noble truth says to get it, but that's the state of the mind.
and that's what I'm saying is that you can't. That's what you're experiencing. So just, but that which is aware of that, this is your refuge in awareness.
Yeah.
The awareness of the desire to become a stream enterer is like this. I'm not saying you shouldn't have it. I'm not saying get rid of it, but to know it as you're changing from being the knowing. It's a sankhara, and you're grasping the sankhara, and then you're going to be disappointed because it's all sankharas cease and you don't get what you want. You see, so then you're this letting go of sankhara isn't like getting rid of anything. It's not annihilation, but it's just releasing that blind, habitual attachment we have to things like that, to goals, to achieving, to getting something we want. And a lot of meditation, as we all start out with that, with wanting to get jhanas and get stream entry. I used to try on that. Because that's how I'm conditioned. That's my cultural background is to, you work hard and you get the results. And so that's why working hard, meditating hours and concentrating and then not getting the results is so disappointing. Because, you see a lot of people with incredible willpower and dedication, but they don't reflect. They aren't reflecting on what they're actually doing. They're operating from, if you do this, you should get this result, rather than observing, being the knowing. This is Nopacha's emphasis all the time is not to try to get anything, but to be that awakened Bhutto awareness itself, to trust that. So, we can't help what we feel or think. The moods change and you don't, a lot of the moods we don't want, we don't choose them, but they come, they're like this. And so refuge in Buddha Dhamma Sangha, then that is a refuge in being aware of them. They are what they are, and then our patience with them, allowing them to be what they are. Then, that kind of forbearance of letting them be, then they cease, and you begin to have the insight into cessation of sankharas. Because every sankhara, whatever mood you're in, is no matter how pleasant or unpleasant it is, it's changing, it's impermanent, and the wanting to get rid of it if it's unpleasant or painful, then that's a kind of attachment we form to it. By trying to get rid of something, we're actually attaching to it. When we're patient and allow it to be what it is, then it naturally ceases. And when something ceases, there's still conscious awareness. The absence of grasping is like this. So you kind of like this investigating ability that the Buddha recommended is to not to try to control and create conditions, but to understand the very nature of conditions through this awareness. So, like with monastic life, when you're training in the first year with training with Luang Por Chah, it was a frustrating experience because you come from kind of middle-class American family, city life on the West Coast, and suddenly you're in a forest monastery. And in those days, Wat Pa Pong was very poor. It didn't have proper roads and didn't have piped water. We had to draw water from wells. It was very primitive and very strict Vinaya and different language and culture. And you're kind of the only foreigner in the whole place. So you feel lonely, you get paranoid, you feel frustration, boredom, you imagine things. But with Ajahn Chah's emphasis on Sati Sampajanya, I got to that right very immediately, because that's what I could do. Even though I couldn't understand, it took me a year or more to understand the language. When he gave desanas, or proper sermons, I couldn't understand them. And then he'd make me sit through them. He was sometimes talking for 5-6 hours at a time. And you can imagine how the kind of mental states you'd go through of knowing how you should respect the teacher, and you've got all these ideas of what you should be doing, and you should be grateful to the teacher, and then you hate the teacher, and then you want to leave, but because the nature of the practice was this kind of patience with and observing. I got a lot of insight that first year just through looking at being frustrated and lonely, emotions that I didn't feel so strongly when I was a layman, and so. But I began to have confidence, because once you began to realize the strength, your power of insight that we all have, and learning to trust that, because when you start thinking about it, you start thinking about your practice, and you're going to be critical, probably, that you haven't achieved what you hoped for, and then you can't meditate very well, or whatever. Don't believe any of that. That's just sankharas coming and going. Learning to trust this awareness, where don't trust what you're thinking, because it'll say anything. You'll have a good meditation, and then you'll get very peaceful. I'm really getting somewhere, and then the next time it all collapses. I'm not getting anywhere. Like Luang Por Chah used to say, good meditation is good. Bad meditation is good.
Well, I have a small inquiry. I'm also a beginner, though I've been in this for the last 2 decades. But the point is, to develop right mindfulness and right concentration, we normally used to go through Vipassana. But then I was exposed that even breathing we used to do Anapan for some time little. But the confusion is which one should be done more and which one should be just part of it. I just wanted to seek your guidance in that.
The difference between samatha and vipassana?
Vipassana and Anapan.
Yeah, samatha. Well, oftentimes, like Luang Por Chah, he says they work together. Where the teachers in Thailand would say, that you've got to do samatha first, concentrate and get the jhanas before you can do vipassana. There's teachers that teach that way. And there's several teachers that teach samatha is delusion, go for vipassana, absolute vipassana. And Rinpoche was much more. He wouldn't say things like that when asked about samatha vipassana. He says, to just calm down rather than trying to attain jhanas or get, you read the books Visuddhimagga or treatises like that, and you get all kinds of ideas about what this kind of concentration and how. But this is why trusting your awareness is better than to try to fit your practice into what you read in a book, because you're the one that's experiencing it. When your mind's all excited and caught up and confused, you know that. I'm feeling excited, I'm very, very confused about everything, don't know what to do. And you're aware that there's this confusion. Trust that awareness. And then confusion is, if you don't resist it and fight it, just relax and let it be, it'll calm down. It's like stirring mud in a pond, if you keep trying to pick the mud out of the pond, you'll never get clear water. If you just stop doing anything and let the mud sink to the bottom, then you get the clear water. But you're the one that knows how you're feeling sometimes, in the present moment. It's not according to some book or some treatise on meditation, but it's on, what you're actually experiencing. And then, we used to try to get one technique that used to be taught was trying to get the jhanas, and then you desperately try, and I get very selfish. I get very upset if somebody made noises, and it was too much distraction. I'd get angry, and I started looking at myself. I said, meditation is making me a nasty person. Before I wouldn't, those things wouldn't bother me. But now that I'm trying to get tranquility and I can't get what I want because the things around me aren't peaceful, I said, I don't want to be like this. I don't want to be that kind of a person. So, with Rinpoche's emphasis, I really, really like that, because the life we lived was quite active. We had, quite going out in villages barefoot and Bindabata and all the kind of work projects that we were engaged in. My ideal was to sit in a forest and meditate, and then I wasn't getting what I wanted. But because of the Rinpoche's pointing, I began to look at that. Look at my mental state, wanting something, not wanting things to be the way they are, not wanting to be bothered with all this work and all these meetings and procedures that we had to go through. And I began to see, the suffering is like this, rather than thinking that if I could find ideal conditions, I wouldn't suffer. So you begin to, and this is where wisdom, where panya begins to become stronger in us. Your your wisdom ability to discern increases the more you reflect. And then when they're reading the Vinaya, and they're very strict with Vinaya, and you got all these how you should be, and so you don't, you feel you can't live up to such high standards of moral conduct and be aware of every detail like that in the Vinaya, where you begin to see that as sakyaditi. Is Vinaya something to make you feel guilty, or is it to help you to be mindful? The Buddha established Vinaya as an asset, something to help you, not to make you more worried and self-concerned. And this is where learning to reflect like this. What is the point of this? Am I more mindful, or am I getting depressed or disillusioned, and because of the situation around me, or is it because of my attitude towards it? And men can be very Western Americans can be very competitive. So, we have competitions of who can sit the longest without moving and things like that. But as you begin to trust your awareness more, you can see through that kind of wanting to look good in front of the group, or attain, tranquility and achieve goals that you've set for yourself or that others have encouraged you to do.
So then, Lurpa, what's the role of sitting meditation then?
Sitting meditation.
Just on the cushion. What is the role of that practice? If we are to be observers, which we can do in any state.
Well, it's like sitting still, and all these kind of practices are something that we would never think of doing, and so we started, meditating. And you're trying to create situations that can help you to investigate. So, like I found sitting very helpful, because this is a posture that I like, and that I could also just calm down by sitting, tranquility. And then in sitting posture, I did a lot of just contemplating the Four Noble Truths and questioning, investigating. Is this suffering? What is when the First Noble Truth, there is suffering, it should be understood. What does that understood mean? And of course, on one level, on the intellectual level, you understand the word, what it means. And so the conditioned part of me is very much, I understand suffering, but to understand suffering as in the First Noble Truth is to stand under it, to observe it, not to just define it or say suffering is a word. It's not a word. It's a feeling. It's an emotion. It's like this, and then to observe that feeling, accept that feeling of loneliness or something missing. I mean, it can be vague, it can be doubt, it can be extreme like anger or greed. But, so much of our life is based on just like anxiety, worry, disappointment, despair, emotions like this. And that's where, the sitting posture gives you it helps to make that more aware of, you're more aware of what you're feeling. And then that integrates into activity. Like a lot of the insights would come through sometimes through activity itself, but also a lot of insight into the Noble Truths was just through sitting and questioning, investigating. And then I could integrate that into active life, like going on alms round. Or like when I started traveling, when I went to England, I'd been invited to, to go to different European countries or New Zealand or Australia far away, or coming back to Thailand. And so you're waiting in lines for immigration, to receive your package. And, just through, because I had insight when I started traveling, I started using these cues because my personal reaction was I wanted to get through the queue to get out, and be very restless if somebody was holding up the queue, I'd observe this kind of restless kind of resentment of not being able to get out of that, to go through the immigration, get your bag, and get out to meet the people that were receiving me. And just by observing that, I began to use just like integrating that awareness into just waiting in a queue, waiting for my suitcase to appear on the carousel and things like this. And just by being aware of impatience and restlessness, you don't get rid of them, but you aren't following them. So more and more, you just through the mundane, ordinary experiences of your daily life, you're integrating, mindfulness, wisdom with living with your family, living in the society, the traffic jams of Bangkok, and all can be opportunities for insight, rather than seeing them always complaining about them or not wanting them.
And so, is there any role of attempting to achieve one-pointedness, of attempting to work on samadhi, or does that not have a very significant role in your opinion?
Well, it comes naturally through awareness. If you have a kind of idea of what one-pointedness is, that's a thought. But as you investigate more and more, then you begin to understand what one-pointedness really, ekagata citta, is. I used to compare it to, like a point. One-pointedness like a point can be just a small dot, or it can be the whole, the one completeness itself. And the Vipassana style is more like that. One-pointedness isn't just fixed on one dot and by shutting out the rest. It's the one-pointedness to receive the totality of the present moment. So it's much more, rather than trying to control them and to be one-pointed on the dot, on the point, you have to shut everything out. So that's like samatha meditation. You control everything and just focus on one point. And that gives you, tranquility. But in the terms of the, insight, it doesn't give you any insight. Where one-pointedness is this broad spectrum of awareness in the present. Like when I talk about sound of silence, that's what it is. It's just this. There's, as you begin to recognize that, then there's the reflective ability of observing. Where is the self? And then, just finding out when you're in American culture is very much based on emphasizing the ego. So you're brought up always with this sense of you've got to prove yourself, be somebody, be independent, be self-assertive, be a champion, be a winner. So you've got all these very high-minded goals, of what you should be. And so the ego feeds on that, so you can never quite, even if you win a race or something, you can't keep winning races, you're going to lose. And if the ego depends on winning and proving and having the most money and the most power, then that, is hubris, it's bound to let you down because it's unsustainable. So in monastic life, which isn't ego-oriented, the ego still operates, but the whole emphasis on is mindfulness. So you begin to observe the ego, and I could see so much of my suffering as a layman was self-created. It wasn't generated from outside, but just worried, comparing myself always with ideals or with others, and seeing myself always in terms of having to prove myself in some way, get something I don't have. I'm not good enough the way I am. I need to get something. I have to become better, and on like that. I began to break through, see through that, just through this awareness, and by listening to it, not by trying to control it. And then I'd say that which is aware, I'm not just the thought. I'm not good enough the way I am. And then I'd listen to myself thinking that, and then I'd see that that's something I create, and that which is aware of that thought, is not that thought. And so you begin to trust the awareness and not the thought or the emotion. So this is a way of like investigating, just to see what is the self, what is the ego, and you have to create it. When you're not thinking, there's no ego. But when you have to think to become a person. And so thinking is, a conditioned factor in your life. You weren't born thinking. And so, and then how you think about yourself is dependent on your cultural background too, your social background, your identities, and how you look, and whether you're male or female. So these are conditioned factors, but then this awareness is unconditioned. It's natural. It's Dhamma, and trusting that, where you can't trust the conditioning. But you can trust your ability to know some of it is good, like to refrain from killing others and not stealing and being honest and so forth. The kind of moral precepts are the basis for meditation, for good behavior in society. But when we so that we have both the honorable conditions and the dishonorable ones, and it's the panya to discern. They are conditions. They arise and cease when we act, and through action and speech we do the good and refrain from doing the bad. But the honorable and dishonorable conditions are sankharas of equal value. one is, how like sila is about, keeping the moral precepts, which is how human society, what we can agree to, in regards to behavior and speech. But then the liberation isn't through sila, but through wisdom, sila, samadhi, panya. So the samadhi comes through this patient endurance, through awareness, and the panya is informing consciousness. Like the Buddha teachings, they're all wisdom teachings. They're pointing at consciousness itself, for you to bring down the illusions that you have about yourself and the world that you live in.
I just had this question recently. Again, one very respected teacher told me that when you practice the path of wisdom, and even if you experience emptiness, the latent tendencies still remain. And for removing latent tendencies, you must practice jhana, bring them to the surface, and then only the real freedom from suffering happens. So, in that scheme of thinking, jhana is a prerequisite for wisdom. Is that so? What is your comment on that?
Well,
Right. Last question.
Excuse that bird.
I see.
But what was it you're asking?
Are jhanas necessary to be aware of the latent tendencies, and is it that a wisdom practice does not remove latent tendencies?
Because Lumpo, the voice in the mind continues even as we observe it. So I think the point is that is merely continuous observation adequate, or is there something further required?
Well, that's where I found this is a technique I found very helpful, was to think, intentionally think, like I'm not good enough the way I am. Intentionally think that, because then your intention is to think something, but you're not interested in the content of the thought, but in the fact that there's awareness of the words, and there's always space between I and am and not and so on. So then I pay attention to the spaces between the words. So it's a way of beginning to be more confident with an empty conscious reality and in a moment. Like if you think I, even before you think I, there's emptiness, isn't there? There's a gap. And then you intentionally think I, and then there's another non-self. It's a space, it's a gap between the words, and then and then there's another space. And you're not like the spaces between monks or people, or the gaps between the words. This is like informing consciousness with the unconditioned unborn, because you're not anything when there's nothing there. And you think I, and then you grasp the thing, I am not good enough the way I am. And you don't notice the space around the sentence or the space around the words. You're just following the context of the words themselves. So I found it very helpful to train myself to observe really pay attention to I am. I take it like a neutral kind of stuff. I am a human being. So that isn't about, that's just matter of fact. It's not good, bad, right or wrong. It doesn't arouse any strong feelings. And so just something kind of neutral. And then I investigate and I observe this before I think the word I. There's a stillness there. Observe that, it's like this. And then intentionally think I, and then there's another before you go into am, and on like that. It's a way of beginning to not just be caught in the flow of sankharas, just caught in how they connect. And one thing, like in any language, it's grammatical, so you're conditioned to think in process of words, with a noun and a verb and a pronoun or whatever. That when you're just intentionally thinking, trust that awareness before you think I, and then intentionally think I. And then you can't sustain I. There's only one letter. And so, and it's not opera. So it's just very brief, and then there's another gap. I found this, very insightful to begin to trust, and that's where you hear sound of silence in these gaps, and then more and more you're aware of the natural stillness of consciousness.
The question just to find is, will this really help in removing latent tendencies also, or do the latent tendencies still remain?
Well, then you still have you have your karma, your vipaka karma to deal with, but more and more you things like worry, anxiety, like now, and after all these years, there's natural tranquility that I don't create as a person. But still, you feel life, you're living in a community, and you're getting old, and these things, are part of the path, really, because you're seeing, you're breaking through the identity with old age. In a monastic community, you've got a certain amount of it's a morally based community, and you've trained yourself in it, so it's kind of natural way of living your life. To me, monasticism is natural because we have trained, the past 50 years, where in the beginning it was unnatural. It seemed forced and too much, and fussy, and all these minor rules and things. So, and you're from a very liberal social background, and it seemed very unnatural. But then, as like a musician or a dancer, it's through training yourself that this life becomes natural to you. So you don't have to think about what keys to press down on the piano. You just know through training, and it's just the human side is you understand, you realize that the reality of this realm, the impermanence of this realm, and its deluding qualities. So you're no longer subject to those kind of delusions. You still feel it because you're living in a deluded society. You know, so you're still aware. You're not living on a cloud up in the sky. But you feel you've completed something, you know, like your life has been complete. There's nothing more to learn. You know, that there's not something missing. And you kind of feel that this is what maybe the purpose of being born as a human being is about. Because otherwise you're just going to be reborn again and in some state, you know, and it goes on and on and on, and it seems to, you know, like the samsara vata, the samsara of birth and death, it seems to be our reality as human individuals. And, you know, in India, with all its history, you go to India and you know, this is really an old country. It's got so many ruins in it, and so much history, and it goes on and on and on. You know, and then the conditions change, but they're all about greed, hatred, delusion, and it's still pretty much the same from ancient time to the present. And that's where the Buddha, you know, his teaching is so profound, because it comes out of, to us, like to me, it's an ancient religion. So, you know, you think this truth that was available 2,500 years ago, you know, and still managed to maintain itself through that period of time to where I've encountered it. So, I mean, you know, then you feel a lot of gratitude to the Buddha and the Sangha that perpetuated the teaching. But the teaching is timeless. You know, like the Four Noble Truths are not about culture, not about civilization, but about reality itself. Just taking the common reality of common experience that we all have of dukkha, of suffering, and using that to penetrate, to investigate, to see non-suffering or nirvana, which is happiness, sense of relief, the sense of being at ease. So, you know, in the goal, when monks ordain, then their goal is you always say to realize nirvana, and then nirvana gets placed so high up that nobody thinks they can realize it. You see, that's what the human ignorance does, you know. So because I've taught like this, I've been criticized saying you shouldn't teach nirvana. It's, you know, it's impossible for it. And I've heard scholars say it's impossible to realize nirvana nowadays, and they don't know what they're talking about.
You make it sound so easy.
Because, well, it's like that's what language does, you know. It's about the best and the worst, and so when we talk about nirvana, we want to make that the best. That's higher than heaven. It's more blissful than heaven. And we think of heaven as where you're living in a realm of bliss continually, and nirvana is better than that. And that is because this is the limitation of language. But when in the scriptures, you know, when we realized nirvana, it wasn't a high state. It's just a relaxed awareness. An understanding that you can't have through the conditioning, through cultural conditioning or education. And that's where the Buddha's teaching, you know, is so simple, you know, taking the most common experience of suffering and pursuing that. By understanding that, we realize nirvana. non-suffering.
And does that help us, Lumpur, in your experience, free ourselves up of all the vipak kamma, including attachment to self, to body especially, because that seems to be the most difficult to get rid of, especially by mere observation?
Yeah, you begin to, well, you still have to live with your human body, but you're relaxed, like old age, sickness, death are natural. It's just, what the body's doing. It gets old, gets sick, and dies. And the suffering is when you think it's you, when you're identified with it. With, not wanting to be sick and not wanting to die, fearing death, not wanting to get old. But, like, for me, old age is like this. So it's an acceptance of the condition, of decreased sensory abilities and lack of energy and things like this are like this. But if I suffered from it, then I wouldn't want this. I want to be, active, and I want my eyesight back and my hearing better, and so. And I'd like to do all these things I used to do, and then I suffer. But I know better than that. I know better than to do that. And so it's your true refuge is peace, rather than in fulfilling, living up to ideas of what you were in the past or ideas you have about what you want for the future. You're not doing that anymore. You know better.
Great.